Okay, you can go.
Okay, good evening, everybody. The chapter that we are going to be looking at now is chapter 5, Understanding Others. Here in this chapter, we'll be going through the introduction, understanding gender diversity, understanding culture diversity, understanding international diversity, your culture heritage, building multicultural appreciation, attitudes towards differences, cultural influences on leadership behavior, and communication, and also the conclusion. The introduction. Oh, and before I start, feel free to chime in at any point. If you all have questions, you all could just unmute your mics and ask. Okay, so it is important for not only leaders, but for everyone to understand themselves well enough to recognize how they are seen by others and to adjust their own behaviors and attitudes to foster an atmosphere of openness and connection with others. It's also necessary to put in the effort to understand people so that you may establish meaningful communities and coalitions for collective change. Now, groups are made up of people from many walks of life, even if all members are of the same sex or major or significant disparities in personality. Their learning preferences may differ, their personalities may differ, and their experiences may differ, as well as a group's pluralism refers to the variety of differences that must be recognized in order to achieve common goals. Pluralistic leadership emerges when diverse groups of individuals collaborate, and to be successful at this form of leadership, one must truly hold no biases and be open to diversity. Now, this chapter takes a look at how understanding diversity of gender, ethnicity, and culture are things that should be explored and learned when one aspires to rise to the call of leadership. This chapter looks at the importance of inclusivity and diversity and how to uplift and empower difference instead of being judgmental. The chapter also looks at how different methods impact key leadership processes such as communication, conflict resolution, and decision making. The chapter finishes with the study of communication qualities that are essential in working well with people in leadership, such as empathy and assertiveness. Now we'll move on to talking about understanding gender diversity. So, how does one's gender influence their mood and attitude? How does one's gender have an impact on how they perceive things and how they are perceived? Anyone have an idea? Okay, well, I want you to keep those two questions in mind while we cover this section of the chapter. Now, before getting into the chapter, I think it's important to state the difference between gender and sex. So while these words are often used interchangeably, in this context, we are referred to sex. When we refer to sex, when we refer to sex, we refer to biological human functions. For example, like pregnancy is a role associated with women, and men are known for having a larger muscle mass and lower fat percentage. This is just generally speaking. So about gender, we see gender roles as roles that are assigned to men and women based on social beliefs. Gender is a social construct. Now, this is another question. If gender is a social construct, then does that mean that it could change? Well, the answer to this question is yes. Social constructs do change. According to Very Well Mind, A social construct is a concept that exists not in an objective reality, but as a result of human interaction. It exists because humans agree that it exists. Essentially, people's thoughts and attitudes are not absolute and can be altered. For example, we'll take a look at how people's attitudes towards people with disabilities or different skin colors have changed over time and how they are still changing. This is the same for gender. In this modern era, the boundaries of what is gender are being explored. And while there's pushback from a lot of society, there is a change that is already beginning to take place. An example of this would be people who identify themselves as agender or gender fluid or gender non-conforming, etc. Right? You're following?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, from the beginning of our lives as children, we are taught gender roles by parents, right? So, like guardians, caretakers, teachers, etc. And you might hear a male child ask, for example, but mom, why can't I wear a skirt like my sister? And the mother would reply along the lines of, well, dresses are for girls, or something like boys aren't supposed to wear skirts. From that moment on, that lesson is ingrained in the child about what is socially acceptable. There are parents, however, who attempt not to promote any specified gender roles to their children and cannot prevent them from learning about them, but they cannot prevent them from learning about them elsewhere, such as from like peers, television, teachers, or anyone who comes into contact with the child. Some may see this as a good thing, while others might see it more in a negative light, but at the end of the day, it's all subjective by your beliefs. While children inevitably are indoctrinated into traditional gender roles by society, parents can still teach their child how to have positive or respectful attitude towards those who do not fit the gender norm. When we look back at the first two questions, how does one's gender influence their mood and attitude? And how does one's gender have an impact on how they perceive things and how they are perceived? Well, it's quite simple. From childhood, we are taught that boys should be tough and they shouldn't cry and they should be unemotional, objective, and competitive. It's taught generally through various sports and activities, while girls, on the other hand, should be quiet, polite, caring, emotional, and nurturing. And this is taught by girls playing with dolls and playing house, etc. Because women are taught to be more emotional, caring, supportive, when faced with a problem, they tend to use a more compassionate and empathetic approach. Men, on the other hand, tend to take more of a direct problem-solving approach. These analogies, of course, are just looking at the broader scope and not on an individual level. Each gender is capable of making responsible and informed decisions, being excellent leaders, being responsible members of society, communicating with clarity and efficiency, even if they may each go about it differently. Sex or gender, however, is only one identity perspective that we bring to the situation. We all have other salient social identities that are based on attributes such as our culture, ethnicity, age, or sexual orientation. Before we move on to the next part, does anybody have any questions on what I just said? If not, we can move on. Okay, so understanding cultural diversity. Before we can understand the diversity of culture, we must first understand what culture is. So Oxford Dictionary defines culture as the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. Everyone is born into a culture. Some are raised in a combination of cultures, such as children born from interracial couples or those who migrate. The difference between cultures can be seen clearly when you change environments. What may be respectful and socially acceptable in your culture can be extremely disrespectful or crass in another. Some small things that you would usually pay no mind to are suddenly shamed and chastised for. Suddenly realizing the jarring difference between your culture and someone else's is commonly referred to as culture shock. Has anyone ever traveled and realized that the customs that you're seeing in this country that you just traveled to is different from what you're used to? Thank you, Melinda, for being honest. Thank you, Kelly, for being honest. It could really be a shock. And and to get through this interaction with both parties, leaving as unoffended as possible, effort needs to be put in by both parties. So, as a foreigner, you need to communicate that you mean no harm by what you say and put ample care and attention and effort into learning this new cultures, customs, and way of communication. On the other hand, natives should be understanding and patient, and they should not be quick to take offense as the foreigner may mean no harm. Cultural, sorry, culture has often been described in terms of race and ethnicity. Race, however, is nothing more than a social construct used to classify a large group of people based on shared distinctive hereditary combinations of physical features. It is said that certain races have more privilege than others, and this is a result of racism, which is when persons have hate and distrust for another based on their physical attributes. This usually affects minorities negatively, making them feel unsafe and unwanted. Discrimination does not just stop at race, it can be due to several physical attributes that can cause the minority to feel scrutinized, ostracized, persecuted, and oppressed by the majority. People with privilege are presumed to be innocent, worthy, and competent, even though they have done nothing to actively prove such a thing. We must examine how the characteristics of these forms of privilege may be attached to our expectations of what it means to be a leader or not to be a leader. We must learn to value or at least recognize that leaders take on different characteristics. And another thing to note is that culture is a very broad term and it does not just apply to countries or ethnicity. For example, a job environment is referred to as office culture or work culture, where a certain degree of professionalism is expected of those associated with it. And also universities and college also have something similar, and it's also referred to as campus culture, where students are expected to display a behavior that does not disrespect the environment. Everybody clear on that, or you're good? Only have no questions, or you have questions? Let me know.
I good.
Okay, everybody good? All right. So, understanding international diversity. As stated in the previous section, the difference between cultures can be seen clearly when you change environments. The best way to learn is by doing and experiencing other countries and their people. It's no different. One place that is great for that is college. You get to interact with people from different countries and cultures and form connections. When it comes to international diversity, it's required of leaders to know how to manage this well. They are expected to know cultural differences because it's impossible to lead effectively if you do not know your audience. They must know how to work around the differences and similarities among countries, and they must know the cultural customs to present appropriately. It is important to note that global leadership growth entails increased flexibility, cultural empathy, ambiguity, acceptance, absence of prejudice, cultural relativity, and knowledge of one's roots and stereotypes. Project GLOBE, which stands for Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness. This is an extensive international study of mixed cultural leaderships, including over 60 countries and cultures. It's a project that was founded in 1993 by Robert J. to analyze organizational norms, values, and beliefs of leaders in different countries. The project studied 9 dimensions of culture which varied among different countries. So the 9 dimensions of culture are assertiveness, future orientation, gender differentiation, uncertainty, avoidance, power distance, which is power expected to be shared unequally within the culture, institutional emphasis on collectivism versus individualism, in-group collectivism, that is membership in small groups and families, performance orientation, and humane orientation, which is the fairness, generosity, and caring. Anybody had questions on that?
No.
Okay, thanks. So now we'll move on to cultural heritage. Before you can understand others, you must first understand yourself. Look into your heritage, your ethnicity, and the culture and values and beliefs that surround it. The pair that went before us would have talked about understanding yourself, and this is an extension of that. So how and in what ways are you similar? In what ways are you similar, and what ways do you differ from these stereotypes? Now that you've identified this, you can take a look at other cultures and see which parts of their culture and belief align with the way that you perceive life. Think about how you were influenced by these cultures, and if not direct influence, look at passive ways you may have been influenced, whether by generational tradition or through the media. Ethnicity and culture aren't the only things that you should learn about. Ethnicity and culture aren't the only things that you should learn about, but you should try reading about adult growth and aging as well. Deaf culture, religious diversity, geographical distinctions, these are all things that you should look into. And this knowledge will come in handy in leadership to understand the preconceptions that newcomers into the group may have, which may impact a person's conduct. Now, we could just take a look at this quote from Annie Millstone. The benefits of working with people who are different from you are extreme. If you are an effective leader, you will be inclusive in many facets of the world. As an individual in a leadership position, it is crucial to possess the ability to hear and be open-minded and inclusive of different people or different ideas. The ability to accept and work with one another strongly adds to the knowledge base of the group. Now I will take the time to hand you over to my colleague, who will go through building multicultural appropriation with you.
Okay, hi. Hello,
Hello.
is anyone hearing me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes, I hear you.
okay, so Alexa, you could go on to the slide, as you said. Okay, so in this segment, we learn about building multicultural appreciation. So we have two questions that we can ask ourselves. Question one, what is multicultural appreciation? And question two, how does building multicultural appreciation affect our understanding of others? This section on building multicultural appreciation delves deeply into how individuals can improve their ability to comprehend others, particularly those from varied cultural origins. It underlines that effective leadership and involvement in diverse organizations necessitate a serious commitment to establishing cultural awareness and understanding. The chapter uses David Hoop's 1979 intercultural learning process model to illustrate the stages people go through as they go from ethnocentrism and multiculturalism. Firstly, what is multicultural appreciation? Multicultural appreciation is the ability to perceive, understand, and value the world's diverse cultures, customs, and perspectives. It entails cultivating an open minded and polite attitude towards persons from various cultural origins. Multicultural appreciation goes beyond simply tolerance to recognize the inherent merits and contributions of different cultures to society. How does building multicultural appreciation affect our understanding of others? Does anyone know? Or does anyone have an idea? Okay.
Repeat the question.
Does anyone know how does building multicultural appreciation affect our understanding of others? Does anyone have an idea?
Can
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Well, as discussed in the segment, building multicultural appreciation has a tremendous impact on our understanding of others by guiding us through a transformative process that allows us to build a deeper and more nuanced understanding of people from diverse cultural backgrounds. This process, as articulated by David Hoops in this intercultural learning process model, assists individuals in transitioning from ethnocentrism and into multiculturalism. This voyage has improved our knowledge of others in the following ways. So we have moving beyond ethnocentrism, increasing awareness, gaining knowledge and information, acceptance and respect, appreciation and valuing, selective adoption, and multiculturalism. For moving beyond ethnocentrism, this is the first stage of where it's a closed-minded viewpoint in which individuals believe their own culture is superior. Has anyone ever faced a situation like this before? By a show of hands, has anyone ever experienced a situation like this before, where they're in a culture where everything is closed-minded or of a closed-minded viewpoint? Alyssa, okay. At this point, individuals may be intolerant of different cultures. Recognizing and admitting one's bias is the first step towards understanding others. It causes people to reconsider their previous views and acknowledge the existence of diverse cultures. Increasing awareness. The journey to awareness entails recognizing cultural variety and comprehending that cultural differences do exist. This stage broadens one's perspective and increases awareness of cultural differences. promoting a more open mindset. Gaining knowledge and information. So how do we go about this? As people progress through the stages of comprehension, they actively seek knowledge and information about other cultures on a rational and cognitive level. This phase encourages students to study about diverse cultures in a detached and objective manner, enhancing their grasp of cultural nuances. Acceptance and respect. The final step is to accept and respect others' cultures without comparing or judging them to one's own. It represents a shift toward a relativistic viewpoint, accepting the idea that it is acceptable for people to possess opposing viewpoints and beliefs. Individuals at this stage have a live and let live mentality, acknowledging the validity of others' cultural ideas. Beyond acceptance, multicultural appreciation entails recognizing and valuing certain characteristics of different cultures. This stage shifts from objectivity to subjectivity, allowing people to consider cultural factors in terms of their own identity and values. Can anyone give me an example of this? Does anyone have an example of appreciation and valuing in building multicultural appreciation? Or does no one have an example? Okay. For example, people may develop to view the strengths and assets of other cultural perspectives. Selective adoption. Some people may go even further by selectively adopting principles or characteristics of foreign cultures that they admire. This level is incorporating these cultural elements into their daily life, demonstrating a real understanding for different points of view. Multiculturalism. The ultimate goal is multiculturalism at the end of all of this, which is a continuous process in which individuals feel at ease and can communicate effectively with people from different cultures. This level of comprehension transcends cultural differences, providing for a really open and enjoyable experience when dealing with people from different backgrounds. In conclusion, developing multicultural appreciation is a transforming journey that improves our understanding of others by challenging ethnocentrism and increasing awareness and knowledge, encouraging acceptance, and finally leading to an enriched perspective that values and appreciates diverse cultures. This process is necessary for effective leadership and involvement in a variety of settings, and it contributes to more inclusive and compassionate relationships with people from all backgrounds. In this next segment now, we speak on attitudes towards differences. In this segment, we talk about 3 points. Those 3 points being, in what ways does the segment imply that attitudes about differences evolve throughout time? And what are the stages of this process of development? 2, what are some severe effects of negative attitudes towards differences such as racism, homophobia, or sexism according to the segment? And what impact do these attitudes have on people and society as a whole? And lastly, what tactics or approaches can individuals and communities use to foster positive attitudes about differences and better understand others? So into point 1. In what way does the chapter imply that attitudes about differences evolve throughout time? What are the stages of this process of development? Well, to answer that question, attitudes about differences evolve through a transformative process throughout time. It suggests that people often begin with ethnocentrism, in which they believe their own culture is superior and they may show intolerance against other civilizations. They do, however, go through numerous stages of development as they mature. They progress from awareness, in which they realize the existence of diverse cultures, the comprehension in which they acquire rational information about the cultures. The next level is acceptance and respect, in which people acknowledge the legitimacy of various civilizations without passing judgment. They may progress from accepting to recognizing and valuing specific characteristics of other cultures. Some people even go so far as to selectively incorporate features of foreign cultures into their lives. Ultimately, the goal is to establish multiculturalism in which individuals engage with people from various cultures in comfortable and successful manner that transcends cultural considerations. This process is regarded as critical for effective leadership and involvement in a variety of settings, encouraging more inclusive and empathetic relationships with people from various backgrounds. Now on to point 2. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
No.
Okay. Point 2. What does some survey effects of negative attitudes towards differences, such as racism, homophobia, sexism, according to the segment? What impact do these attitudes have on people and society as a whole? Systemic inequities, unequal access to opportunities, and racial conflicts, for example, can all be the outcome of racism. Homophobia can result in discrimination against LGBTQ plus people, negatively impacting their mental health and well-being. Sexism maintains gender inequality by restricting opportunities and perpetuating harmful preconceptions. These unfavorable sentiments contribute to a less inclusive and harmonious society on a societal level. They have the potential to cause social divides, conflicts, and even violence. Discrimination and bias impede people from realizing their greatest potential, stifling society, progress, and development as a whole. These negative sentiments, in essence, weaken the concepts of equality, diversity, and social cohesiveness, ultimately hindering society's collective well being. On to point 3. So I have a question for the class. Does anyone have a suggestion for the third point? What could be a third point here? Okay, so what tactics or approaches can individuals and communities use to foster positive attitudes about differences and better understand each other's?
By embracing each other's differences and making it up to learn about
Yes,
culture.
that's a good one. There's also a variety of strategies and methods that people and groups can use to promote a positive attitudes towards differences, as you said, and deepen their understanding of others. These tactics can anyone give me an example of some of these tactics?
Self-awareness seminars.
Yes.
Well,
Anyone else? Okay. Some tactics include encouraging positive interactions and relationships with people from different backgrounds, standing up for the rights of marginalized groups, exposing people to a variety of cultural experiences, combating stereotypes and biases, celebrating multiculturalism, organizing community initiatives, and showcasing leadership and role models who champion diverse cultures. Anyone could give me an example of a role model in this case? No? Okay. Oh yes, Melinda, you can.
I'm not really a role model, but Caitlyn Jenner.
Yes, that's
Right.
actually an
And
example. Yes.
yes, well, I'm not saying not really a role model, right? I'm not against the trans community, but she actually changed everything about herself. And she's standing proud for who she is, and she do have a
Correct.
lot of how to say it, she have a lot of following, right?
Yes.
So she's
Mm-hmm.
following when she was a man, now she's a woman, she has that same following.
Exactly. Now, in this scenario as well, whether we deem Caitlyn Jenner to be a role model or not is subjective to anyone's opinion, as the topic could be controversial as well. As some people may agree to disagree on the whole idea of LGBTQ and up. So, together, these initiatives work to build a society that values diversity and respects it, making it easier for individuals from different origins to live in peace with one another. On to the other segment. So, now we have cultural influences on leadership behavior. So, can anyone define to me what is cultural influences in their own word?
A culture that have a huge influence on a mass of people.
Yes. Correct. So cultural influences describe how an individual's cultural background, which may include elements like ethnicity, race, religion, and what Melinda said, a huge background, language, and customs, affects their behaviors, values, beliefs, and interactions with other people. These factors have an impact on a person's worldview, how they view and interact with the world, as well as their attitudes and behaviors in various social and professional contexts. Cultural factors significantly influence how people behave in terms of diversity, communication, and leadership. So, what are some key questions you think you can ask in this segment on cultural influences? No one? Okay.
What are some of the influences of certain cultures?
Yeah, that's a good one. What about you, Mariek?
Um, like understanding other person's culture and trying to it and influence it your own.
Okay. By the way, your mic is a little bit static. I just letting you know. Okay, so on to the next slide. Now I had three, these are my three key questions for this chapter, right? And I'll call them out and explain each point. So point one, how are our behaviors and views in group context influenced by cultural factors such as sex, race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, religion, ability, or even socioeconomic status? Point two, what part does cultural diversity play in the selection of leaders in diverse groups, and how does it influence leadership philosophies? And the third question that I would have is, what interpersonal communication abilities are necessary, and how might they support people in their quest for understanding others from various cultural backgrounds? So, into explaining the first point, as I'll go back in the first point, yeah, how are our behaviors and views in group context influenced by cultural factors like race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, religion, ability, or socioeconomic status? Well, my answer to that is our personality, preferences, attitudes, and values are clearly influenced by this, which has an effect on how we approach leadership in general, communication, and decision making. The chapter stresses the segment stresses the significance of accepting diversity within communities as a strength rather than a weakness. Does anyone agree with that statement? This stresses the significance of accepting diversity within communities as a strength rather than a weakness. Anyone?
Yes.
Okay, nice. I agree as
Yes, I
well.
agree with it.
Yeah. Additionally, this highlights the intricate interaction of cultural backgrounds, variables that affect behaviors, and promotes understanding these interactions rather than relying on stereotypes. Communication techniques, methods for resolving conflicts, and group decision-making procedures are all influenced by culture. Anyone agrees with that statement as well? Because I agree that communication techniques and methods for resolving conflict and the group decision making, for example, even like what we're doing now, a group presentation, understanding these factors is very essential for successful relational leadership and interactions that we may encounter in the future. Okay, on to point 2. What part does cultural diversity play in the selection of leaders in diverse groups, and how does it influence leadership philosophies? Well, cultural cultural diversity plays a significant role in the selection of leaders since they are picked for their cultural competence. Their cultural competence, ability to represent identity groups, dedication to inclusivity, and cross-cultural communication abilities. These leaders are qualified to create a setting where people from many cultural backgrounds can work together successfully. Leadership theories are also influenced by cultural diversity, which promotes pluralism, collaboration, and teamwork as guiding principles. Cultural sensitivity, strengthening underrepresented groups, and developing inclusive workplace environments are priorities for leaders. Essentially, cultural diversity influences leadership philosophies and plays a significant role in leader selection, influencing leaders to adopt more inclusive and culturally sensitive strategies that improve group cohesion and performance. And on to the last point. What interpersonal communication abilities are necessary, and how might they support people in their quest for understanding others from various cultural backgrounds? So before reading the slide, does anyone have their opinion on what interpersonal communication abilities are necessary? Melinda, Maria? Okay. Well, to answer that question, these skills include effective cross-cultural communication techniques, active listening, empathy, and knowledge of nonverbal communication. Through active listening, people can gain a deeper understanding of the speaker's viewpoint by paying attention to their emotions and nonverbal signs. Can anyone define to me in their own words what do they think is empathy? Can anyone define what empathy is?
Showing some sort of feeling towards somebody.
Exactly, having understanding of one's emotions, one's situation, or even an understanding of each other as well. Correct. Empathy encourages people to respect the special difficulties and perspectives of people from other cultures. Understanding nonverbal indicators such as gestures, body language, helps avoid misunderstandings as well. Learning about various cultural norms and communication styles, ensuring interactions are culturally sensitive, and establishing respect and trust are further components of good cross-cultural communication abilities. These skills work together to promote courteous and meaningful interactions, lessening prejudice, and increase cultural competence, ultimately fostering goodwill and a more accepting society. So, in conclusion, leadership philosophies can benefit from cultural variety in the selection of leaders by encouraging a more inclusive and pluralistic approach that embraces the distinctive viewpoints given by people from different backgrounds. Interpersonal communication skills such as active listening, empathy, which we just discussed, awareness of nonverbal communication such as body language, and cross-cultural communication skills are essential for improving understanding between people of different cultural backgrounds. These abilities encourage cultural components and lessens bias as whole. On to the last segment, which is leadership and communication. What is leadership and communication? Leadership and communication is the ability to direct, influence, and motivate people or groups to achieve shared goals or objectives, and is referred to as leadership. It entails establishing a vision, making choices, inspiring people, accepting accountability for results as well. The process of communicating involves conveying and receiving ideas, information, emotions, and feelings through a variety of means, including spoken or written language, gestures, body language, as mentioned in the previous segment, and many more. Effective communication is essential for getting messages across, such as exchanging information and fostering understanding among people and organizations. On the basis of leadership and communication, the following queries might be developed. So on the next slide, we have 3 points that we can ask ourselves. So let's get into point 1 again. Why are these abilities crucial for leadership, and what sets successful communication apart from merely convincing speaking or component writing? Effective leadership relies on strong communication skills because they enable leaders to articulate their vision, inspire others, make informed decisions, and build trust within a team or organization. Successful communication. Before we go on to explaining that, what does anyone know what creates successful communication amongst peers or amongst a group of people?
Open-minded suggestions.
Yes, correct. So like group charisma, anyone else has any other suggestions on what creates successful communication?
Understanding.
Correct. Right. So successful communication goes beyond persuasive speaking or competent writing by encompassing also active listening, empathy. We've been seeing this word a lot because I think that's a very important part in understanding others and communication as whole, and the ability to understand others' perspectives. Okay, so this is having an open mind or thinking outside of the box. It involves engaging in meaningful dialogue, seeking shared understanding, and fostering open two-way communication. So I don't know if anyone ever heard, understanding one another is like a two-way street, there's not just a one-way street. Successful communicators prioritize building relationships, facilitating collaboration, and ensuring that messages are not only convincing, but also comprehensible and relatable to diverse audiences. Now we're going to point 2. Why is mindful listening regarded as a purposeful activity, and how might empathy and active listening improve the quality of communication in a pluralistic setting? Because it takes deliberate participation and a concentrated effort to fully comprehend what someone is saying, mindful listening is regarded as a purposeful activity. Active engagement and focus on the speaker's message are required for mindful listening as opposed to passive hearing. Empathy and attentive listening can greatly improve communication in pluralistic contexts. Understanding others' experiences, feelings, and views allows people to relate to them on a deeper level. Empathetic listening is a form of active listening that guarantees people are completely engaged in the discourse, improving comprehension and promoting an inclusive and courteous atmosphere. People in diverse situations can eliminate misconceptions, overcome cultural barriers, and forge stronger bonds based on respect and understanding by engaging in empathetic and active listening practices. And on to the last point, point 3. How can our impressions of others and the results of our interactions become influenced by self-fulfilling prophecies? And how might making favorable assumptions about other people promote more productive communication. So can anyone define for me in their own words what they think self-fulfilling prophecies can entail in a situation like this? Anyone? No? Okay. Maria, you wanted to say something?
Stress for everyone within you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so self-fulfilling prophecies, which happen when our assumptions or beliefs about something lead us to behave in a certain way that generates reactions that correspond with our initial expectations. And it can affect our perceptions of people and the results of our relationships. Now, with that being said, we have to be very careful as human beings how we go about these self-fulfilling prophecies instead of, jumping into conclusions before getting the facts without thinking outside of the box, without listening to someone else's perspective or their understanding, or having that clear communication with them. It could cause us to react in a way that does not help the situation at hand. Okay? For instance, if we think someone is hostile, we might act distant or chilly towards them. Naturally, that will be our human instinct, correct? Which prompts them to feel or react unfriendlier as well, supporting our initial suspicion. By establishing a positive feedback loop, making optimistic assumptions about other individuals might encourage more fruitful interactions. We have a tendency to act in a more open, amiable, and polite manner when we go into conversations with the presumption that others are competent, willing, and well intentioned. So, in other words, it's telling us to approach situations with a more optimistic mindset rather than approaching it with pessimism. In the long run, this is beneficial. This is a beneficial cycle that can promote a more productive and peaceful environment by enhancing relationships, lowering conflict, and improving communication. So, to summarize this segment and this entire chapter that we've learned, understanding others is a crucial ability in interpersonal communication and leadership, in my opinion. This comprehension includes a range of diversity related factors such as sex, race, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, religion, ability, and socioeconomic background, which has been mentioned multiple times throughout the chapter. Individuals' views regarding diversity change as they move through several stages of personal development, from ignorance to acceptance and appreciation. Racism, homophobia, and sexism are examples of negative views that can have serious negative effects on people and society, resulting in discrimination and missed opportunities. People and communities can use empathy, active listening, which has been mentioned, and cultural sensitivity to promote good attitudes and better understand each other. Influences from culture have a big impact on how people behave and communicate in groups. Effective leaders acknowledge the diversity of personality preferences, attitudes, beliefs, and values that cultural influences bring and respect the fact that communities are not homogeneous. They use pluralistic leadership style and work to transform the organizational culture such that diversity is seen as a strength. Understanding people from various cultural origins requires interpersonal communication skills, especially sympathetic listening. Understanding others' viewpoints, their emotions, and developing an emotional connection are all components of empathy as well. Cross-cultural understanding can be improved by recognizing the impact of speech communities on verbal and non-verbal communication patterns. Cultural variety has an impact on approaches and values in decision making and conflict resolution processes. Leaders in different organizations must manage disputes morally, preserving goodwill while pursuing reform initiatives. In general, appreciating variety, encouraging empathy, and honing communication skills are keys to understanding others. leadership may be improved, relationships can be strengthened, and inclusive settings can be created through acknowledging the importance of cultural influences, accepting pluralism, and engaging in active listening. Okay, that will be it. Thank you all for listening, and those are the references.
All right, if there are no questions, I'll pause the recording.